Cleveland sells America, a picture of lakefront beauty, sports pride, hospital power, museum halls, renovated downtown apartments, and a comeback story rising beside Lake Erie. But beyond that polished image, in freezing doorways, empty homes, bus stops, and east side blocks scarred by abandonment, another Cleveland is breaking apart where families lose shelter while the cold waits like a punishment. This is Cleveland in 2026, a city shaped by water, steel, factories, music, medicine, sports, and survival. It is a city with world-class hospitals, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, lakefront views, historic neighborhoods, and a downtown that has tried to reinvent itself after decades of decline. To visitors, Cleveland can feel like a hardworking American city finding its second life. But for people without housing, the story is different. The lake that makes the city beautiful can also make the winter brutal. The same neighborhoods that carry history also carry empty houses, absentee owners, tax delinquency, blight, and streets where poverty has been passed down like a wound. The same city that celebrates affordability is watching rents rise fast enough to push vulnerable families closer to the edge. The same region that has built shelters and housing programs still has people sleeping outside when the air turns dangerous. This is not just homelessness. It is winter survival. It is family displacement. It is fentanyl. It is mental illness. It is poverty. It is the contradiction of empty homes in a city where people still need shelter. It is the feeling that a city can be rebuilding in one neighborhood while another neighborhood is still waiting for the emergency to end. Stay with this story until the end because Cleveland's crisis cannot be explained by one number or one policy. Some programs are working, some people have been housed, some shelters are saving lives. But the deeper crisis remains. Too many people are still one rent increase, one overdose, one eviction, one winter night, or one broken support system away from losing everything. This is the Cleveland homeless crisis of 2026. 1. The crisis behind the comeback. Cleveland is a city that understands loss. It has lived through industrial decline, population loss, foreclosure waves, disinvestment, poverty, and the long fight to stabilize neighborhoods that were once built around factories and working class families. It has also shown resilience. Downtown has grown in places, old buildings have been converted, hospitals and universities have become economic engines, sports and culture still pull people together. The city has pride because it has survived things that could have broken it. But survival is not the same as justice. There are still Clevelanders who look at the word comeback and wonder who it is talking about. They see new investment in some neighborhoods, but blighted homes on their own block. They hear about development, but their rent keeps rising. They see old warehouses turning into apartments, but they cannot afford to live in them. They see politicians talk about growth, but their family is one court notice away from shelter. This is where the homeless crisis begins. Not always under a bridge, not always in a tent. Often it begins in an apartment where the rent is no longer possible. It begins with a mother who falls behind after her hours are cut. It begins with a senior whose fixed income cannot absorb rising taxes, rising utilities, rising food costs, and rising medicine costs. It begins with a worker who can still show up to a job but no longer earns enough to stay housed. It begins with a family that tries to stay with relatives until the tension becomes too much. Then comes the couch, then the motel, then the car, then the shelter line, then the street. Cleveland is often called affordable compared with coastal cities, but that comparison can hide the truth. Housing is only affordable if income can actually pay for it. A low rent can still be too high for a household living near poverty. A cheaper city can still be unaffordable to the people who already live there. And Cleveland still has deep poverty. Even with improvement, data has shown that the city remains among the poorest large cities in America. That poverty does not stay on paper. It shows up in eviction courts, school absences, unpaid bills, food pantries, shelters, and children who learn too early that home can disappear. 2. Lake Erie cold and the danger of sleeping outside. Winter in Cleveland is not background scenery. The lake changes everything. When cold air moves across the warmer waters of Lake Erie, moisture rises, snow bands form, and the weather can turn sharp, fast, and dangerous. Lake effect snow can be narrow, intense, and punishing. One neighborhood may get dusted while another gets buried. For someone inside a heated home, it can be inconvenient. For someone outside, it can become life or death. Cold does not simply make homelessness uncomfortable, it attacks the body. It enters through shoes first, then socks, then hands, then knees, then the chest. It makes a thin blanket feel useless. It turns wet clothing into a threat. It makes sleep dangerous because stillness lets the body lose heat. It turns every hour outside into a calculation. Where can I go? How long can I stay? Will anyone make me leave? And can I make it until morning? In Cuyahoga County, winter shelters are not just charity, they are emergency infrastructure. A new seasonal shelter operated by the Northeast Ohio Coalition for the Homeless opened in downtown Cleveland to provide overnight space for people who typically sleep outside during the winter. The shelter offers nearly 50 spaces, including room for couples and people with pets, groups often excluded from traditional shelter options. The Metanoia Project also operates a seasonal shelter with capacity for about 40 people. Those spaces matter. They save lives. But the fact that seasonal shelters are needed so urgently says something painful about the crisis. Cleveland's cold is predictable. Winter comes every year. And every year, the city must ask whether there are enough places for everyone to survive it. A person outside may not be refusing help because they do not care. They may be afraid of shelters. They may have trauma. They may have a partner or pet they cannot bring inside. They may have belongings they fear losing. They may not know where to go. They may be in active addiction. They may be too mentally ill to navigate the system. They may have been turned away before. They may simply be exhausted. When people die from hypothermia, the tragedy is not only the temperature, it is the system that did not reach them in time. 3. Empty homes and the contradiction of shelter. Cleveland has a painful relationship with empty houses. There are neighborhoods where vacant and abandoned homes are not rare exceptions. They are part of the landscape. Some have boarded windows, some have sagging porches, some have open doors, some have been stripped, some are waiting for demolition, some are owned by absentee landlords, some are tied up in taxes, legal issues, title problems, speculation, or neglect. To people living in stable housing, an empty home may look like blight. To someone sleeping outside, it may look like a question. How can a city have empty houses and still have people without shelter? The answer is complicated. Many vacant homes are not safe. Some would cost too much to repair. Some have mold, fire damage, structural problems, or missing utilities. Some are trapped in ownership issues. Some sit in neighborhoods where disinvestment has made rebuilding difficult. A vacant house is not automatically a home, but emotionally, the contradiction remains. A family sleeping in a car does not experience those explanations as comfort. A man walking past boarded houses in the snow does not feel better knowing the property has title complications. A mother in shelter does not stop wondering why so many structures sit empty while her children have no bedroom. This is where anger begins. At Cleveland City Council meetings, residents and officials have raised concerns about blight, absentee owners, zombie houses, investor takeovers, rising rents, and gentrification. Some neighborhoods, especially on the east side, still carry the deep scars of the foreclosure crisis. Some council members have spoken about the loss of wealth in black communities and the role of banks, housing collapse, and property systems that extracted value and left neighborhoods damaged. That kind of history does not disappear, it becomes distrust. Some residents believe empty homes are being held for future profit. Some believe investors are waiting while neighborhoods suffer. Some believe the system reacts faster when developers want land than when families need housing. These claims vary, and not every rumor can be treated as fact. But the suspicion itself is part of the story. When people see empty homes, rising rents, and homelessness at the same time, they begin to wonder whether the crisis is accidental or tolerated. 4. Families losing shelter. The most painful face of homelessness is often the one the public never sees. A family experiencing homelessness may not be in a tent. They may be in a car. They may be in a motel paid for one night at a time. They may be doubled up with relatives. They may be sleeping in a shelter but still waking every morning with no sense of permanence. They may be hidden because parents are afraid of judgment, child protective services, school stigma, or separation. Family homelessness is quieter than a street encampment, but it can be just as devastating. A child without a stable home learns instability before they understand the economy. They learn that belongings must stay packed. They learn that adults whisper at night. They learn that a phone call can decide where they sleep. They learn to brush their teeth in unfamiliar bathrooms, do homework in noisy rooms, and pretend at school that everything is fine. Parents carry the shame even when the crisis is not their fault. A mother may be working and still unable to afford rent. A father may sleep less so his children can rest. A grandmother may take in relatives until the apartment becomes overcrowded and the landlord threatens everyone. A teenager may hide their housing situation from friends, not because they did anything wrong, but because poverty makes people feel guilty for surviving. Cleveland's youth homelessness problem has also drawn public attention. Local reporting has noted conflict over a planned youth drop in center in Ohio City, a fight that exposed the tension between service providers, zoning decisions, neighborhood concerns, and young people who need help. According to that reporting, Cleveland has lacked a dedicated youth drop in center despite hundreds of young people experiencing homelessness each year. That detail matters. Young people experiencing homelessness are not just small adults. They are often running from family conflict, abuse, rejection, poverty, or instability. They need a place to shower, charge a phone, meet outreach workers, access counseling, get documents, and feel safe without being immediately judged. When a city cannot agree on where young people in crisis are allowed to receive help, the crisis becomes more than housing. It becomes a test of what the community is willing to see. 5. Opioids, fentanyl, and the quiet collapse. No story about Cleveland homelessness is complete without addiction. Cuyahoga County has been hit hard by overdose deaths for years. The county medical examiner's 2025 December report listed hundreds of suspected overdose deaths, with Cleveland carrying the largest city share in the table. The report also showed fentanyl remaining a major force in overdose fatalities, even as the numbers have declined from the worst peaks. A decline is important. It means outreach, harm reduction, treatment, public health work, naloxone access, and community awareness are saving lives, but fewer deaths does not mean the street is healed. Fentanyl is still there, cocaine is still there, meth is still there, alcohol is still there, trauma is still there, mental illness is still there, and on the street, every risk becomes heavier. Addiction does not always begin homelessness. Sometimes homelessness begins addiction. Sometimes both grow together. A person loses a home, then loses sleep, then loses safety, then uses something to get through the night. A person starts with pain pills after an injury. Then the prescription ends, but the pain stays. A person in grief uses to numb memory. A person with untreated mental illness uses because the world feels unbearable. A person already addicted loses housing because recovery is impossible without stability. People watching from a distance often ask, why don't they just stop? But stopping is not a simple act when your life is built around survival. How do you detox without a bed? How do you attend treatment without transportation? How do you keep medication safe without a locker? How do you make appointments without a charged phone? How do you stay sober when you are cold, hungry, ashamed, and surrounded by the same pain that pushed you toward drugs in the first place? Recovery requires more than willpower. It requires housing, treatment, trust, time, and support. A person does not heal from a sidewalk. They may begin there, they may survive there, but healing usually needs a door, privacy, stability, and someone who believes the person is not beyond repair. 6. The poverty divide Cleveland cannot outrun. Cleveland's homelessness crisis is tied to the city's geography of poverty. Poverty is not evenly spread. Housing damage is not evenly spread. Blight is not evenly spread. Disinvestment is not evenly spread. Some parts of Cleveland have experienced new investment, rising home prices, and fears of gentrification. Other parts still carry blocks of abandoned homes, vacant lots, and long term neglect. This divide creates two different Cleveland realities. In one Cleveland, old buildings become apartments. Restaurants open, young professionals move in, property values rise, streets get cleaner. New construction is celebrated as evidence of momentum. In the other Cleveland, residents still battle absentee landlords, tax delinquency, blighted houses, unsafe vacant structures, and limited access to financing for repairs. A homeowner may want to fix a house but cannot get a loan. A renter may want to stay but cannot control a rent increase. A block club may fight for years to get dangerous homes addressed. A family may live beside a vacant property that attracts dumping, crime, and fear. The homelessness crisis grows inside this imbalance. When poor renters have no margin, rising rent becomes displacement. When poor homeowners cannot keep up with taxes or repairs, vacancy can follow. When neighborhoods lack investment, families have fewer options. When services are concentrated in certain areas, those neighborhoods carry the visible burden. When development moves in, longtime residents worry they will be priced out of the very stability they waited decades to see. This is why some Clevelanders distrust the word revitalization. They ask, revitalized for whom? If a neighborhood becomes attractive only after longtime residents are pushed out, is that progress? If vacant lots become new homes that current residents cannot afford, is that repair? If investors profit from the recovery of neighborhoods damaged by foreclosure, who receives justice for the loss? These are not easy questions, but they are necessary. 7. The promise and pressure of a home for every neighbor. Cleveland has not ignored homelessness. The city's A Home for Every Neighbor initiative was launched to bring people experiencing chronic, unsheltered homelessness indoors more quickly. The program set a goal of housing 150 people within 18 months, and according to reporting from the National Housing Crisis Task Force, housed 155 people in about 8 months. The model involved outreach, case management, unit acquisition, subsidies, cleanup coordination, and landlord incentives. That matters. It means people who had been living outside were connected to real housing. It means outreach workers did more than tell people to move. It means the city tried to match people to units before clearing sites. It means Cleveland attempted a more trust-based approach than the punitive sweeps seen in many other cities. But the work is fragile. Housing someone is not the same as solving the system. People need ongoing rent support, case management, health care, treatment, employment help, documents, and time. Landlords need incentives, units need to exist, funding needs to continue. And this is where federal changes create fear. Local reporting warned that potential changes in HUD funding priorities could reduce permanent housing support in Cuyahoga County. Advocates said more than 2,000 households could be pushed toward homelessness if permanent housing resources are cut. The concern is that shifting money away from permanent supportive housing toward transitional models could destabilize people who have finally left the street. This is not just a budget debate, it is the difference between someone keeping an apartment and going back outside. The phrase housing first has become politically charged. Critics say it can ignore addiction, mental illness, or personal responsibility. Supporters say housing is the foundation that allows people to address those issues. Cleveland service providers argue that people are more likely to heal when they are inside, stable, and treated like adults with dignity. The question is not whether treatment matters. It does. The question is whether people can truly recover while sleeping in the cold. 8. Shelter as a lifeline, not a solution. Seasonal shelters save lives. Emergency shelters matter. Warming centers matter. Outreach matters. A bed on a freezing night can be the difference between morning and death. But shelter is not home. A shelter can protect someone from hypothermia, but it cannot give them long-term stability. It can provide rest, but not always privacy. It can connect people to services, but it cannot create affordable housing on its own. It can reduce immediate danger, but not erase the rent crisis, addiction crisis, mental health crisis, or years of neighborhood disinvestment. This is the problem Cleveland faces. The city needs shelter now and housing next. It needs immediate safety and permanent exits. It needs emergency response during winter and year-round prevention before families lose homes. It needs to make sure that every person sleeping outside knows where to go, can get there, can bring what matters, and can trust the people offering help. Trust is often the missing piece. People living outside may not trust government. They may not trust police. They may not trust shelters. They may not trust nonprofits. Sometimes that distrust comes from trauma. Sometimes it comes from past failure. Sometimes it comes from being told help exists and then finding no real path forward. A system that wants to help must understand why people hesitate. If someone refuses a shelter bed, the question should not only be, what is wrong with them? It should also be, what happened in the system that made this person afraid to accept help? 9. Rumors, drama, and the business of poverty. Whenever homelessness continues, despite public spending, rumors grow. In Cleveland, some residents ask why the city can fund downtown projects, sports facilities, development incentives, and housing plans, while poor families still struggle to stay housed. Some question whether absentee owners and investors are being held accountable. Some believe banks and real estate players profited from foreclosure damage while communities were left with the ruins. Some online voices claim that homelessness has become an industry with nonprofits, contractors, consultants, landlords, developers, and political actors all tied to a crisis that never fully ends. There is no verified proof of one hidden conspiracy controlling Cleveland's homelessness crisis. But the suspicion itself says something important. People do not trust systems that produce visible suffering and then ask for patience. When residents see vacant homes and homeless families at the same time, they wonder who benefits. When they see rents rise in a city still known for poverty, they wonder who is protected. When they see shelters open only in winter, they ask what happens in May. When they see people housed through one program, then hear that funding may be cut, they wonder whether the system is built to stabilize people or cycle them through crisis. This distrust can be dangerous, but it is not irrational. It comes from decades of broken promises. A city cannot fix homelessness with slogans. It cannot fix it with temporary beds alone. It cannot fix it with development that ignores displacement. It cannot fix it by hiding people from view. It cannot fix it by pretending addiction and mental illness are separate from housing. Cleveland needs transparency because people are tired of not knowing where the money goes, who is accountable, and whether programs produce permanent outcomes. 10. What Cleveland must confront. Cleveland's crisis is not impossible to understand. It is just hard to face, honestly. The city needs more affordable housing, more deeply affordable housing, more permanent supportive housing, more eviction prevention, more youth services, more winter shelter, more treatment access, more mental health response, more street medicine, more landlord accountability, more action on vacant and abandoned properties, more help for families before shelter becomes the only option. It also needs to protect residents from both abandonment and displacement. That balance is difficult. If nothing changes, neighborhoods continue to suffer from blight. If investment arrives too aggressively, longtime residents may be pushed out. If vacant houses remain, they become hazards. If they are repaired only for higher income newcomers, the housing crisis deepens. If shelters are blocked from certain neighborhoods, people remain outside. If shelters are concentrated in the same neighborhoods, those communities feel overburdened. There is no clean solution, but there is a clear moral standard. People should not freeze outside in a city with the capacity to do better. Cleveland has already shown that targeted housing programs can move people from encampments into homes. It has organizations willing to open shelters. It has land banks and housing groups working on blight. It has advocates who understand the street. It has residents who care. It has enough history to know what abandonment costs. The challenge now is scale. Can Cleveland move from emergency response to prevention? Can it turn vacant land into real opportunity without displacement? Can it treat addiction without criminalizing poverty? Can it house people before the winter becomes deadly? Can it protect families before children learn what homelessness feels like? Final message. As night falls over Cleveland, the city becomes two places at once. One, Cleveland glows beside Lake Erie. Stadium lights shine. Restaurants fill. Hospitals hum. Downtown apartments warm behind glass. Snow begins to fall, and from inside, the city can look almost peaceful. The other Cleveland is outside. Someone is walking because standing still is too cold. Someone is sleeping in a car with the engine off to save gas. Someone is staring at a boarded house and wondering whether broken walls are safer than open air. Someone is fighting withdrawal in a doorway. Someone is waiting for a shelter bed. Someone is trying to keep children calm while pretending tomorrow will be better. These people are not statistics. They are not blight. They are not public relations problems. They are human beings. Cleveland knows how to survive. It has survived industrial collapse, foreclosure, population loss, and the long humiliation of being underestimated. But survival alone is not enough anymore. The question is whether Cleveland can protect the people who have the least room left to fall. A city should not be judged only by its museums, hospitals, stadiums, lakefront, or downtown revival. It should be judged by whether a person can survive winter without a home, whether a family can stay housed after one emergency, whether an empty house becomes a restored home instead of another symbol of abandonment, whether someone battling addiction is offered a path back before the street takes everything. If this story moved you, tell us in the comments, what should Cleveland do first? Expand winter shelter, build more permanent supportive housing, repair vacant homes, protect renters from eviction, create a youth drop-in center, or invest more deeply in addiction treatment. If stories like this matter to you, please like this video, share your thoughts, and subscribe for more human-centered documentaries about the lives America too often overlooks. May every person sleeping outside in Cleveland find warmth tonight. May every family close to eviction find help before the street becomes their only option. May every young person without shelter find a safe door. May every person fighting fentanyl find one more chance to live. May every empty home become either a safe place for life or a healed part of the neighborhood instead of another wound. And may Cleveland be measured not only by how beautifully it rises beside Lake Erie, but by how fiercely it protects the people freezing in its shadow.